what I want to talk about today is a brand new series called Breaking Bread. Breaking Bread is really going to be about us processing through the Last Supper. So I'm going to set this here like I'm having a meal standing up, which doesn't make any sense to anybody but me. But we're going to talk about breaking bread. And as we do that, we're talking about the Last Supper. And you're probably familiar with the Last Supper and familiar with what took place on that day, because it's in every single faith tradition of Christianity. Is something we call communion, the Last Supper, all of those things. And as we take a look at it, I want to provide some perspective on some of the history and some of the context of what was taking place. And I want to apply it to how I think it should affect your daily life, how I think and believe it should affect every single day of your life. Because what we're doing in this series is trying to help you see how God has this tendency, this habit, if you will, or consistent mode of doing things where he takes things that are mundane, takes things that are average, and sometimes things that seem to have no use. They're not very useful. They would what would we call useless. Take things that the world is ready to throw away, things that are trash, things that are boring, things that are mundane. Fill in the blank for you. And he leverages those for something sacred, for something holy, for something beautiful, for something amazing. And so through this series, I want to point out different aspects of how he's going to do that and maybe challenge you to see some of the mundane in your life and start to see it as holy in the hands of a God who wants to use it for such. But to do that, let's talk through what breaking bread is and what communion is and what these guys were doing sitting at a table 2,000 years ago and how we're still talking about it today. So Passover or the Lord's Supper took place on Passover. And this is Jesus in Jerusalem the day before, the night before, the night of him being sacrificed, him going to the cross for our sins. So in that moment, they come into Jerusalem and there's a festival, there's a party, there's a thing going on. And every year, Passover would have existed. So it's not for anybody that's celebrating Passover, it's not a unique Passover. It's not a special Passover. It's just another holiday that's coming up that we've had before. And we remember something special that happened, but that's not the same as saying that this holiday is going to be different, right? So they're coming to celebrate Passover, and Passover is simply them commemorating the moment that Israel, the nation of Israel, was set free from slavery in Egypt. Right? If you've looked in the Old Testament, you'll see the story, and a lot of you have seen the story of the 10 plagues, or you've read the story of the 10 plagues. And the final plague was God being done. The 10th plague was like, I'm done. I'm not playing with Egypt anymore. I've given them all the chances I can give them. And so whoever doesn't have this blood across the doorpost of their door, I'm going to take the firstborn. To just let them know that we're done playing games. I've given you all the chances you can have. And so Passover celebrates that blood that was shed, that every Jewish person, every Israelite put the blood of a lamb on the doorpost to say, let the angel of death pass by, and their kid survived. Their children survived. And then Egypt finally let them go. They finally were set free. So on Passover, you would take a lamb and you would sacrifice that lamb and remember that. You would eat Passover bread. There was a specific type of bread that was unleavened that you would eat because that was the bread that he told them to make. And then you would have a dinner with your family, and it would be a family celebration to remember God set our people free. It may have cost the blood of a lamb, but we were set free, right? If I'm a slave in Egypt, the cost of a lamb might have been kind of expensive. But the cost of my child would have been too much to bear, so it was absolutely worth it. So they're celebrating this event, right? And at this event, Jesus takes a average holiday, like every year it happens average, a holiday that's taking place every single year, a moment with his disciples, and he takes two elements of something that they would have had every day of their life, bread and wine, and he changes everything. Let's read the passage in Luke chapter 22, verses 19 and 20. It says, and he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it. And he gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. So this moment, this statement, these two very basic elements, the bread and the wine, those two elements all of a sudden have changed now. Like this moment has changed how we view bread and wine consistently for 2,000 years. So much so that we in the church world have been debating what it actually means when you take communion. Like this, you probably, unless you grew up Catholic maybe, you probably don't recognize that there's like actual debates and arguments and significant literature placed on top of what took place with the bread, especially the bread, right? And the wine. They talk about, theologians are arguing, we've had churches split over what actually happens with the bread. Right? The Catholic Church believes it's called transubstantiation, which means it actually physically becomes the body of Christ as soon as the priest places it into your mouth. Physically becomes. There's some groups that believe kind of a combination. I mean, it is the blood, it is the body, it is the blood, but it kind of is also a symbol. And then there's a lot of people that just believe it's a symbol. I just want to know what part of his body we're all eating. That's what I want to know. I'm here to ask the serious questions, right? I like all you theologians can debate whether it's really his body or not. It's just like, is it back skin? Because that was where I went. You want to know where my head goes? Someone said ooh. Yeah, what part of his body would not be ooh? Like what part? What part of his body? Like, well, I mean, I'll take a pinky finger. That's not gross. That's not gross. But see, here at The Brick, we ask the hard-hitting questions. Y'all ask, is it his body? I need to know what part of his body I'm eating. The only reason, just so you know my psyche, is because I'm still picturing the Passion of the Christ and that whip hitting his back and all the skin coming off. Oh, yeah. You guys know we're at church, right? Jesus sacrificed himself. I don't want to spoil the ending for you guys about what happens, because y'all seem pretty shocked by what's taking place. But in that moment, for 2,000 years, every time we come together, every time we do this moment, this memory, he says, do this in remembrance of me. Remember how my body was broken. Remember how my blood was spilled for you. I need you to remember this thing, so much so that this bread is no longer just bread. You can eat bread every single day, and some of you are on those diets where you can't eat bread, so I'm really sorry that I'm messing with you right now. But you can eat bread every single day of your life, and then there's a moment where you eat that bread and something changes. Something in that bread changes, something in you changes, something about your perspective changes. And there's a moment where you could have juice all day long, you could be drinking wine all day long, and then there's a moment where you drink it, and everything changes. Because what God does is takes things that are mundane, things that are average, things that are normal, and takes them and makes them holy and sacred and unique and memorable. So through this series, we're talking about a few things. We want to talk about moments, people, and objects in the hands of God. When they're in God's hands, they're no longer just a person. It's no longer just a moment. It's no longer just a piece of bread. When they are in God's hands, they become sacred. They become holy. This idea of sacred, let me just break it down for you, because sometimes these words have ethereal meanings but no practical meanings. When I'm saying sacred, for the context of this message, when I'm saying the word holy, which I'll use interchangeably, what I mean is set apart, uniquely designed for the things of God, for the kingdom of God, for the move of God. He will take everyday plates and make them holy plates. He will take everyday people that grew up in an average home in an average city doing average stuff, and use them to leverage his kingdom and change the world around them. He will take every aspect of what you put in his hands, and he will use it for something special. And so today, what I really want to focus on are moments. I want to focus on what it looks like for God to take a moment, and to take the moment that you have, and for you to be intentional with that moment and see if he doesn't use that moment to make it sacred. See, because in this passage, in this moment that he's having with his disciples, I don't think that they recognize what's happening. I don't think that they understood the power of the moment they were in. And I don't think sometimes we really grasp the moments that we're in and the times that we're in and the things that are going on around us, that if we just stopped and said, God, this is yours. What do you want to do with it? If we just stopped and placed this moment in God's hand and said, hey, something unique is about to happen. What would happen if I gave it to you, right? For them, it was Passover coming up. And the disciples showed up and hung out with Jesus on Passover. For us, it's something coming up this Thursday. For us, it's something coming up this Christmas. Thursday is Thanksgiving. For some of y'all are confused. You guys know Thanksgiving's coming up, right? Okay, cool. Get you a turkey if you eat meat. I don't know what you do. But this Thanksgiving and this Christmas, the reason I wanted to start with moments is because there are such unique moments coming up right around the corner. that you have that are special and that can be special, and they could just be special because it's one more Thanksgiving or it's one more Christmas, or it could be special because you place it in God's hands and he takes it, makes it sacred and holy and unique. He makes it a year you never forget because you decide to say, no, this is a special moment. This is unique. God, what could you do with it? One of the things that reminded me of how unique our moments are was a blog post called The Tail End. And it used these kind of graphs and different things in it to explain what it looks like to really put time into perspective. And what it says is we're in the tail end. What we recognize as adults is that we are in the tail end. And it went through the data points of how, like, when the guy writing it was 37 when he wrote it. And he said, I have spent 90% of the moments that I had with my parents already. 90%. He says, I'm at the tail end of the moments that I have left with my parents because of the actual time we get to spend together. A majority of it happened when I was living in their house. And so now I get a couple, 3, 4 times a year that I'm with my parents. I'm in the tail end. And if I recognize that I'm at the last 10% of those moments, I'm going to try to leverage them differently. And he goes through every bit of moments and thinking through, what do you do with those moments when you recognize you don't maybe have as many as you think left? Some of you are younger, so you're like, cool, I got a bunch of Thanksgivings left. I got a bunch of Christmases left. Maybe you do, but you may not have a bunch left with your grandparents, with your great-grandparents. Grandparents, you are in the last few Christmases you get with your kids, the last few Thanksgivings you get with your grandkids, to tell them how much they matter, to tell them the story of who Jesus is and what Jesus has done in your life. If you recognize how precious the moment is, maybe you'll change whose hands it is in. You go, with me, it's a moment, and I can make it as special as I can make it. Right? This Thanksgiving is a cool moment. I can make sure the table's set and the turkey's perfect. I can order the turkey from somebody else since I can't cook so they can make it perfect. I can do all of these things to set the stage for the perfect Thanksgiving, and I can make it amazing, but I can't make it holy. I can't make this table holy. I can't make this setting sacred, but who can is God. If I will turn it over to him and put it in his hands, he can do something amazing, something beautiful, something that we and our families will never forget. And I recognize this for a lot of you, that it's 2 different moments coming up, probably in extreme versions of it for you. For some of you, you're excited. You're just elated. It's Thanksgiving. It's Christmas. I can't wait to hang out with my family. I cannot wait for this moment, this special time that we don't get all the time. We all come from out of town. We go to the same place. We go to grandma's house. We go to mom's house, whatever it is for you. It's a very special, amazing moment that you're excited for, you're elated for. And for others of you, it may be a moment of dread. You may recognize that, like, I come into Thanksgiving, I come into Christmas season, and I'm terrified because I spend all year trying to become something different. And it seems like all my triggers, all my moments, all my anxiety, everything that I thought I'd grown out of come flooding right back to me in this holiday season. They come flooding right back to me when I'm around my family again. I heard one pastor talk about how that takes place. That we go around our families, we think that, like, we're good, I've matured now and I've grown and everything's going to be fine. And all of a sudden you find yourself with the same anger that you had before. You find yourself going back to the same addictions that you thought you had overcome. You find yourself feeling like the little anxious kid that you were years ago that you thought you had overcome. And what he said is that the reason that they're so good at those triggers and those moments is because usually, many times, if we're anxious about being around our family, they're the ones that put the triggers there. He says they put the codes to our nuclear weapons in us so they know exactly which buttons to push to send us right back to the place we didn't want to be. And so this moment for all of us is either this exciting, we're elated for it, or it is this anxious, nervous moment. And either moment in the hands of a good God can change everything. It can you can change your perspective. You can change how you hand it to God. All of these things can shift if we'll hand it to God and trust him over our own emotions, our own desires. And what I recognize is that both of these are complex, right? That it's really complex to figure out how do I give a good moment over to God? How do I trust him with something I'm excited for? And then on the other side, what do I do if they're my triggers? Do I put myself in harm's way and risk going back to my addiction to be around my family? Or do I make a hard decision and call them, say, I'm not showing up. I'm going somewhere else for Thanksgiving because I just can't. I love you, but I can't. I can't be there. Well, those are hard decisions to think through. Like, can I change my mindset? Can I tell a different story to myself before I go to this moment of Thanksgiving? Can I tell myself a different story before I show up with my family this Christmas? Or do I need to not show up at all because following Jesus comes first, even before my family? What do I do with that? That's complex. And I would love to give you some easy 1, 2, 3 answer. Here's how you figure it out and here's how you decide. But it's not that simple for any of you. And that's why, shameless plug, that's why we have breaking bread groups happening tonight. That's why we have groups that we can sit around and have conversations about what it means and what does it look like. And you're going to find out some people in your group have the same triggers. Some people you break off to, God's going to place in the right spot in the right moment. You're going to have conversations. You're going to try to be vulnerable for the first time in many years. And you're going to say, I love my family, but I can't stand being around them. What do I do? And you're going to hear stories of what they're gone through and what they might do and what worked for them and how they did it. And you're going to try something different this year as you decide to give God this special moment that is Thanksgiving, this special moment that is Christmas. If you decide that you can give tonight as a moment to God, to show up to the group, to connect, to be vulnerable, and see if God won't use that moment. So when we come to moments, there are 2 ways to show up to a moment. And there's 2 ways to show up to a moment. One is faith-filled. Like you just know God is about to do something amazing. Right? A moment's about to happen and you come expectant. The time that this takes place is with the woman with the issue of blood. Many of you have heard this story. Actually, Pastor Ryan shared a little bit piece of it last week as well. And the story of the woman with the issue of blood is she came with faith. Like she had 12 years of issues in her blood that no doctor could fix. She had gone for 12 years trying to figure out, how do I solve this thing? And then after 12 years of hopelessness, she hears about the Messiah who happens to be healing a bunch of people. And so she sets in her heart this moment of expectation, this moment of belief, this moment of conviction, this moment of faith, that if I can just get to him, that moment will change everything. If I could just touch the hem of his garment, is what she says to herself. I could just touch the hem of his garment, I can be healed. This is my moment. And she comes with all the faith she's got, and she's excited for that moment. And she gets there, and there's a massive crowd, and she has to work her way through the crowd, which is already dangerous. This is a woman touching men, not acceptable in her culture. It was a dangerous moment for her, but she said, my faith says if I can just touch the hem of his garment. She gets there, and Jesus feels something touch him. And he says, who touched me? And his disciples kind of mock him in a way, not in a rude way, but just like, there are people crowding all over us, Jesus. What are you talking about? Who touched you? A bunch of people touched you. Like 5 people touched you. We're shoulder to shoulder here. Everybody's trying to touch you. And he says, no, something different happened. I felt power released from me. Something just happened. Who touched me? And the woman spoke up and said, it was me. Can you imagine the faith? Like she's already risking something. If he's like the rest of the Pharisees, when she says it is me, he has the opportunity to stone her because she's doing something she shouldn't do, touching a man who's clean when she's unclean. He has an opportunity to shame her in front of everybody, and she's willing to say by faith, like, no, I touched you. And what Jesus tells her is, look, your faith has made you whole. You're healed. What I want you to catch about that moment is the faith that she conjured up, the faith that she came to at this moment. It wasn't Jesus' faith that healed her. It was her faith in the moment she was coming to. It wasn't a conscious decision that Jesus made to heal her. It was her expectation of what God could do if she could just get to that moment. And that to me is profound. Like I'm all about depending on Jesus' faith, but there are moments where God is saying, no, I need you to show up. I need you to have expectation. So I'm going to challenge you, if you're coming tonight, to come with expectation. Come with faith. Come with belief that God could do something with this moment, that one night, one moment, God can do something. I'm going to challenge you every Sunday to show up with faith, to show up to believe that God could do something amazing. It's just this next Sunday, if I'm there in worship, what could God do in my heart? What could God do in my mind? Just show up to these moments with faith. You find out somebody's sick and you decide to pray and believe that God is going to do a healing in their life, and you show up with faithful expectation that God will do something amazing. That's one way to show up to a moment. That's my preferred way of showing up to a moment, is with faith. And then there are other moments. Other moments where you've done everything you can to conjure all the faith that you've got, and you just don't have it. Where you're like, man, I just need God to do something. I think it could be this Sunday, but I don't even have hope left to believe. Like, I'm too drained, I'm too exhausted, I'm tired. I don't have it in me to conjure up the idea that this moment can matter as much as I want it to matter, because my hope's been let down before, and so I don't know. And in those moments, see, there's moments that you show up with big faith, and then there are other moments where you show up just to be found faithful. So if you're taking notes, sometimes you show up to be found faithful. Sometimes you show up with big faith. Sometimes you show up with big expectations. Sometimes you just show up because that's what it means to be faithful, because you know you're supposed to be there. And that's what I actually think the disciples did. I don't think none of the disciples' actions at Passover or really any of the 3 years with Jesus seemed to show us that they had a lot of faith, like a lot of expectation. It seemed like they just kept showing up. And at Passover, the Last Supper, the last moment with Jesus, it doesn't seem like it's any different. Like, Jesus tells them, I've got to suffer. The Son of Man has to suffer. He kind of gives them a warning, but all of their reactions to him, all of the indications suggest that they think that's a metaphor. Like, well, yeah, but not like that though. Like, you don't got to die, right? Like, everything that happens when he goes to the cross and dies, they're so devastated. They clearly don't think this is a part of the plan. They clearly are not like, woohoo, this is all about to be good. They're all just like, oh, well, that was a wasted 3 years of our life. That was cool. Which means that when he broke the bread, I don't think that they saw what was taking place. I don't think that they understood the power in the breaking of bread or the power in the wine that he was serving them. I don't think that they understood the moment. I think they were just faithful. They just showed up because that's where Jesus was. So that's where I'm going to be. So when I don't have the faith to show up with all the expectations, just show up where you know Jesus has been before. Just show up to the place where Jesus has showed up before. Just show up to the things that you know Jesus works through. I don't got the faith to believe for this healing, but man, there's a moment of worship that I can have driving down the road. I'm going to show up for that. There's a moment in Scripture where Jesus has showed up before. I can show up for that. I don't have the faith for God to deliver my marriage. I don't have the faith for God to deliver my finances, but I can show up and just be faithful. Sometimes you show up just to be found faithful, and God shows up there too. God shows up in that moment as well. That you'll just say, you know what, I don't have it all. I ain't got it all figured out, but I'll show up. The disciples gave up time with their family. They gave up 3 years of their life. The disciples I don't think they understood anything other than this guy is doing cool things and I want to be a part of it. This guy picked me, so I'm going to be on his team. I think that's the gist of what the disciples understood for most of their time with Jesus, the Last Supper included, because they don't get it. And then we find out that the disciples, two of the disciples, who we're not even sure which two they were, start walking the day that they supposedly raised from the grave. Like, to me, it suggests that they don't really believe that he's raised from the grave, right? They hear these rumors. The women go and see that he's raised from the grave. The bunch of the disciples just are like, whatever. This is over. Can we just call a spade, guys? Like, this was a fun 3 years, but he's dead. I saw him die. He's not here anymore. We're going to Emmaus. That's where we're going to go. So they're on this walk for 2 days, and a guy walks up to him. There's two disciples walking on this road to Emmaus, and this guy shows up. And what happens is Scripture tells us that they don't understand who the guy is. They can't. Their eyes are kind of blinded to who he is. And he starts asking them questions, and they're like, "Bro, where have you been? Did you not hear all the ruckus going on about this guy named Jesus who died recently?" And he's like, "No, tell me about it." They give him the story, and then he breaks down for them how the Messiah was supposed to die and he had to suffer and how much it meant. And they're like, "What? Hank, kick it with us. Like, we want to know more." It's like you're opening up scriptures to us in ways that we didn't understand. We're opening up scriptures and we just don't get it. And they say, "Okay, the sun is starting to set. You need to come have dinner with us." And Jesus is like, "Okay, cool. I'll come have dinner with you." And then something changes that I think reflects back to a moment previous. They sit down with him. He's explaining to them how the Messiah was supposed to die. And he breaks the bread and hands it to them. And then their eyes are open. They see that it's Jesus, and he vanishes like that. He's gone. They run back to tell the rest of the disciples in Luke 24, verse 35, and they say it like this. Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. I wonder if in that moment, the breaking of the bread, all of it clicked. Like, I wonder if the bread broke and they were like, you're alive. You were dead. You broke bread. We were with you when you broke the bread. The bread was your body. The wine was your blood. You are not just David reincarnate. You're not just a prophet who's come to set us free from the Roman Empire. You are the Son of God who came to set us free from our sin. He, in that moment of breaking bread, that singular moment, shifted history, and they couldn't even see it in the moment. They couldn't see it when it happened. It was later. It was 3 or 4 days later that they saw what the breaking bread could do. Oh, your body being broken changes everything for us. We're not waiting for the Roman Empire to fall. The kingdom is now. The kingdom is here. We are a part of the move of God right now in this moment, not because we knew, not because we had so much faith, but because we were found faithful. Because we stepped up and showed up where Jesus was the moment Jesus was there, and he changed everything for us. And so the question you kind of have to ask yourself is not like, how much faith do I have? Should I have to do all of these things? The question is, where are you called to be when you're called to be there? If it's Sunday morning, where are you called to be? Because that's the moment you need to be found faithful. If tonight you're called to be in these groups, do everything you can to be here. If that's where you're called to be tonight, be where Jesus has called you to be. In the moment, in one moment, Jesus can change everything. And the thing is about tonight is you may, like the disciples, not see how powerful the moment is. It may be the start of the right relationships, the right friendships that change your destiny. And you'll go home after tonight thinking, well, that was kind of cool. Met some new people, had some food. That was fun. That was pretty cool. And have no idea about the power of the relationships you were building, that there were the people that were going to be there to pray for you when you were at your lowest. Have no idea the power of the moment that you just experienced, that those were going to be the people that met the need that you didn't even know you had. Those were going to be the people that counseled you through your marriage woes. Those were going to be the people that helped you get out of debt. Those were going to be the people that you got the opportunity to help. You thought you were useless and mundane, and you give yourself to God and you find out, wow, God can use me to help somebody in this group. I didn't find out till years later the power of a moment. I remember my moment where I showed up faithful. The moment that I showed up faithful, not big faith, showed up faithful. That moment for me was 16 or 17. And it's kind of a weird story because it's not that emotional, but it is for me because I remember the power of the moment. The night before, I'd gone out drinking, and I was 16 or 17, so you can do the math. 16, 17, it's not legal. You're raised in church, you know better than that. I wasn't drinking for a glass of wine, right? It wasn't like hey, let's just have a casual drink. This was me getting drunk, which was clearly sin and clearly something I knew that I shouldn't be doing. So I'm out the night before, partying, doing all the things you shouldn't be doing when you know you shouldn't be doing them. And the next day, I wake up with a hangover. And listen, when it comes to pain, I'm a big wuss, if I'm honest with you. Don't tell my wife this, but I'm a big wuss. When I'm in pain, I want whatever they can have to fix it. I want it immediately because I don't like feeling pain. I whine like a baby. Again, don't tell my wife this. She already knows. But I whine like a baby. I want it all. So I'm feeling miserable and like just so like a victim. Like, oh, I've got a headache and I feel terrible. I've got a hangover, which is probably part of the reason that I don't have addiction in my history is because I don't like feeling bad and there's always a consequence for things. I'm like, it hurts too bad. I can't do that drug again. So in that moment, I woke up. And I had a choice to wallow in my feelings and my sadness and how I felt and how miserable I was. But I also had this other moment that I had the choice to make. And that was to show up to church. Not because I thought God was going to show up. No. I needed to show up to church because I had told our children's pastor that I would do puppets for her. Because every Sunday I did puppets. Some of you are like, puppets? What is this, Sesame Street? In kids ministry, we used to do puppets. I probably have long-term shoulder pain from my puppet days, all right? My thumb has got arthritis in it from my puppet action. I was crushing it at puppets. I would sacrifice my body for these puppets. And so every Sunday, I would show up and do puppets for the kids ministry because I said I would be there. And so I had the choice. Do I show up and be found faithful, or do I stay in bed and wallow in how I felt? And I felt miserable. And I'll never forget the moment. I didn't show up with faith. Like, listen, I grew up in a Pentecostal church, so you would think that God was about to show up and worship. People would run the building. That was a very common occurrence in my church. You would think there could be somebody stop a service and speak a word over your life and speak something into you in the middle of that service. So you would think in that moment, God could use the person preaching to speak exactly what I needed. You would think a lot of things could take place at the altar, all of the things that could take place in that church in that moment where God could speak to me, but it wasn't at the altar. It wasn't during worship. It wasn't even during kids ministry. We had this little hallway. It was this little dark hallway that we needed to add more lights to it because it was like you were walking down like the tunnel where you see the light at the end kind of hallway. And at one side parted off to the fellowship hall is what we called it, but it's really kind of a basement. It was even darker. And then you go upstairs to the kids ministry. And I was walking down this little narrow claustrophobic hallway. And I felt God tell me, this is home. This is where I've called you. This is where I've called you. Not the little hallway, to be clear. Not like, hey, stay in the hallway. This is where I want you. No, this moment, this place. Last night, what you were doing, you know better to do that. He didn't spend time chastising me for the night before. He spent time reminding me of my calling and my worth, all in one singular moment. One moment. One moment just because I was faithful, not because I was good, not because of anything other than I had parents who taught me responsibility. So I showed up to a moment and God showed up and met me there. And so what's your moment? What's your moment going to be? Is it going to be this Thanksgiving when you say, all right, I'm going to come prepped. I'm going to pray up. I'm going to believe God to open a door for a conversation for that family member I've been praying for. I'm going to show up. I'm going to come prepped. We're going to talk about how we're thankful for who God is and what God has done. I'm going to show up to this moment and be found faithful. If I can conjure expectation and faith and believe, then I'm going to do that. But if not, I will still show up to be found faithful. What moment? Maybe it's tonight. You got all this anxiousness about showing up to these groups. And you're like, being around new people, I don't like it. And you're like, I don't want to be there. But I know God has called me to be there. So you show up to be found faithful. And what God can do with a moment that you trust him with is change an eternity. He can change everything about the direction. In one moment, one conversation, you'd be shocked at what God can do in just a singular moment. All the things you've been wrestling for, like, oh, God fixed that for me. All the things you've been worried about, why am I worried about that anymore? Because if you give your moments to God, he will make them sacred. He will make them holy. Let's pray. Thanks for joining us for today's message. And our prayer is that God use that message to get exactly what he needed for you today. If you're still joining us, you may be looking for a way to join the community. We'd love for you to comment, share, send us a message. Help us connect with you because we want you to feel like you're a part of the family here at The Brick. If you're looking for a way to give back, you can text the word BRICK to 45888. That's the word BRICK to 45888. The first time you do that, it's going to connect you to a credit card, debit card, or bank account. We just want to say thank you for being a part of leading people to become fully devoted followers of Christ.